Thank you. I now call this meeting of the Governance and Policy Committee to order. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina First Island Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest tonight? Seeing none, are there any objections or concerns with the draft agenda? Can I please have a motion to approve the minutes of, the agenda is approved then. Can I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the Governance and Policy Committee meeting of September 27th, 2003? Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Miller, thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. I would like to, our first recommended action today is the rescission of accessible customer service policy and regulations, and I would like to call on Heather Mundy, the Superintendent of People and Culture, to speak to the report regarding the proposed rescission of the accessible customer service policy and regulation.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The report can be found on pages 7 to 19 of the agenda package. As you said, the purpose of the report is to recommend the rescission of the accessible customer service policy and regulation. In 2022, the Board of Trustees adopted the Human Rights, Anti-Discrimination and Anti-Racism Policy, which acts as an umbrella, providing direction over other policy matters that were previously standalone. This has led to policy redundancies. The Accessible Customer Service Policy is an example of this. As such, the policy and regulation should be considered for rescission as the relevant operational content has since been incorporated into the new accessibility procedures. For clarity, within the human rights policy, under section 1.4, it reads, in addition, this policy, so the human rights policy, addresses the DDSB's obligations under the Anti-Racism Act and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. This in no way diminishes the Board's commitment to address all forms of discrimination and equal determination as reflected in the terms of this policy below and detailed procedures implementing this policy. Also, in sections 3.21D, it speaks to one of the directives of the policy is to identify, prevent, and address discriminatory structures and barriers for students and employees based on all prohibited grounds and intersecting grounds to make services, employment, and learning and working environments more inclusive and accessible for everyone. Also want to note that in accordance with the recommendations received from the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility following a 2021 audit, the procedure was developed incorporating content from the regulation and additional items to ensure compliance with that audit. This content is operational in nature. Tonight, I have Lisa Coppins here with me as Senior Manager of People and Culture. We are happy to take any questions. Lisa was the board contact for the 2021 audit and also was key in the development of the procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Mundy. Are there any questions from trustees? Yes, Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I have two questions and then a comment, if you will. One is that when it came to the rescission of this policy, I know the original policy and procedure was reviewed by many of our community groups, including SEAC, as well as our accessibility committee. Was there any, was this actually brought to those committees about it being rescinded?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm there was a number of consultations that did take place in the development of the procedure. That included the Accessibility Working Group, which I co-chair. We did bring it to SEAC as well for consultation and feedback, as well as the unions and federations, Human Rights Advisor, Legal Counsel, and other members of the Administrative Council team.
No, I'm talking about the rescinding of the policy. Was that actually brought to either of those committees?
Yes, that was, through you, Chair, that was part of the discussion, that was the plan to bring this forward, and this would then be rescinding the policy, and this procedure would then fall under the human rights policy. So that was discussed as well.
Well, I just in looking through SEAC minutes, I didn't see it there. But I do have a comment about rescinding this at this point in time. It's not saying that it should be rescinded. I'm just saying at this point in time I have concerns. One of the reasons why is when I sat on the K-12 committee, you know, which represented a lot of people from disabilities across the province, looking at an education standard. One of the biggest things was said is that the AOGA, although it's law, and the standards, the 5 standards that are part of that, are law as well. Because there's no real oversight, really, there's no enforcement or over as far as the thing is that a lot of times the thing isn't in. And I look at some of the things that we deal with on a regular basis around around parents having concerns around access to certain things. I have an issue about doing that, as well as under the AOGA. There's also the statements that says that you shall have a policy for each of the standards that are there. So I have a problem of rescinding this unless it goes back to SEAC for sure, and the accessibility, because you say it went to the accessibility. I don't sit on the accessibility, but I don't see any notes on the SEAC as being rescinded. So I would, if they were consulted to develop, I know they were because I was part of that committee at the time, they should also be consulted around the rescinding of this and making sure that their concerns are addressed.
Trustee Edwards, would you perhaps like to put forward a motion around that, or would you like to hear more clarification? There isn't it's up for a vote for rescinding, and at this point in time, I would rather not see it rescinded. If you want a motion, it would be, I would like to defer the rescinding of this motion until it is reviewed by SEAC and at least some of our accessibility partners, like SEAC. And as I said, I can't say that I'm not on the accessibility, but like SEAC. So to start off formal discussion, the motion on the table is that it is recommended that the Governance Policy and Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the Accessible Customer Service Policy and Regulation be rescinded, and that the matter proceed to the next meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration. Can I get a mover for that motion? Seeing none, this motion does not carry. Thank you.
Chair Cunningham?
Yes, Trustee Edwards.
Can I just, I don't want to see this die, so I would like, if it's possible, and it just say that that this matter, the rescinding of this policy be referred, be consulted with our accessibility partners and come back at a future governance meeting, because I don't want to see this die.
Would you like to put forward a motion to refer it to SEAC?
So, well, it's not only SEAC, it's some of our other accessible partners. I don't know if they've been, as I said, I don't sit on those committees, so I would like to say not only SEAC, but any other accessible partners.
Can we put that motion up on the screen? I'm having a hard time hearing Trustee Edwards, so seeing it written out would be really helpful.
I'm having trouble speaking too, so.
Thank you. Through you, through you, Chair. Maybe just to help speed things along, I can assist because I think I caught what Trustee Edwards was driving at. So I'm happy to try to help. I think the motion was to refer this matter to SEAC for consultation and to make sure the other accessibility partners were consulted before the matter came back. So it'll be referred to the SEAC committee and refer to staff for further consultation and report back.
So Trustee Edwards has moved that. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Oldfield?
The motion reflects exactly what Trustee Edwards was saying. I think it's more than SEAC. I think she was saying it's SEAC and other accessibility partners. Okay, is that what it is? Okay, right. But I will second that if that's how it's written. Yeah. No.
Thank you, Chair. It was my understanding that that happened. I feel like Superintendent Mundy had expressed that there had been consultation with SEAC and accessibility partners when discussing this.
Superintendent Mundy, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you. Yes, it was presented at SEAC. I understand that from Trustee Edwards that the minutes were not explicit in terms of the discussion took place. But there was information shared about the next steps, which included the rescission of the policy and regulation, and as it was covered under the umbrella of the human rights policy, and then moving forward with the procedure, which is operational in nature. Also involved in our accessibility committee, we do have representation from the Ability Center, and so they provide some additional feedback. I'm not sure, as to other accessibility partners, that would be appreciated in terms of consultation, but I would, welcome direction on that.
Council Cotter, perhaps you can answer this for me. The motion to rescind was already defeated, so this would be the only way to get the discussion back on the table, or could someone put the motion back forward again should they choose to?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Sorry, I guess I'm using the wrong microphone. The report was presented, and at that time, you as Chair suggested the motion, but it was never moved. And then Trustee Edwards has brought forward this motion. So I'm not sure if this motion I think has been seconded by Trustee Oldfield. So I think you have this motion on the floor now. So I think this motion needs to be debated and voted on. And then if it's defeated, there's nothing precluding the committee from reconsidering the original recommendation, which was never moved.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion currently on the table? Trustee Thatcher.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, it was stated very clearly by Superintendent Mundy that this has already gone to SEAC, presented thoroughly to SEAC, and that would include many organizations who would have a lot of information around the needs of accessibility. It's covered in our human rights policy. I'm not sure, unless we can identify other external organizations that Trustee Edwards is referring to that may have been bypassed. I think that we've covered that aspect of it. So as far as I'm concerned, I would like to move ahead and actually bring forward the motion that is written here.
Sorry, Trustee Thatcher, we can't bring that back. We've currently got this one on the table,
yes,
but we hear you on your perspective on it.
If we could do that, I would be happy to bring that back. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Linton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think if I'm hearing Trustee Edwards correctly, the concern is the documentation of the discussion that seems to be missing. And it sounds like she's just looking for that accountability piece. So I actually am not against it going back to SEAC and other accessibility groups to reaffirm and confirm that this conversation has been had, but this time with the documentation to go along with it. So.
Thank you, Trustee Linton. Student Trustee Cameron?
Thank you, Chair. I would echo Trustee Thatcher's comments around the consultations that have already been done and not supporting this motion. I just think that it's a redundant policy. I think that's the point, is that as much as, you know, things aren't going to change on the ground because of what we're doing today, and, you know, rescinding this policy is part of the process of going about all of the different policies that we have to look at. So if we just keep deferring over and over, when does the job get done? So I think it should be today. So I'm not in favor of this.
Thank you, Student Trustee Cameron. Trustee Edwards?
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. The second part, I understand that people feel that it has been discussed, but when I don't see it in the minutes, and I have had discussions with two members who don't remember it being discussed, is a concern. But the second thing is the whole AODA. It requires us to have policies. Even though you might see that it's redundant under the human rights, it requires us to have policies around the 5 standards. So I really have, unless that gets cleared up, I really have an issue with doing this right now. And as I said, then we can look at it later for rescinding it. But I have a huge concern about the understanding of the consultation that was taking place, and then the fact that it is required under AODA. Anyway, that's just my last comment. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to move to a vote here. Oh, sorry. No, I think we're going to move to a vote here since we've all spoken to the issue. Or is there something urgent that you need to say? Okay, we'll move to Student Trustee Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if Councillor Cotter could clarify what the definition of policy under the AODA, because I know that we've talked about that, and that doesn't necessarily mean a policy of the Board of Trustees, but instead a framework to work around. I'm wondering if you could provide some context around that.
Councillor Cotter?
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. I have the regulation open here. I'm just, and if we're talking about customer service standards, every provider shall develop, implement, and maintain policies governing its provision of goods, services, or facilities, as the case may be, to persons with disability. The following principles must be provided in a manner that respects the dignity and independence of persons. The provision of goods and services to persons with disabilities must be integrated with the provision. So I think it's, you know, it's lowercase p policies. So I would think the framework established by our human rights policy and procedures and the related procedures would likely comply with the definition of the requirements of policies under the AODA Act and regulations.
Thank you. Moving to a vote, can I see a show of hands for people who would like to vote in favor of the motion put forward by Trustee Edwards? This motion does not carry. Apologies. Can I see who would like to vote against this motion? And abstain? This motion does not carry. Moving to item B, the Council Cotter, it sounds like someone may want to put forward the original motion again. Is it okay to open the floor for that?
Chair Cunningham, there's nothing preventing somebody from moving the original recommendation.
Okay.
There's a point of clarification.
Okay. Trustee Thatcher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the Accessible Customer Service Policy and Regulation be rescinded and that the matter proceed to the next meeting of the Board of Trustees. And I think I'm supposed to give a date in there. I think that's, no, am I not? Okay. All right, there it is.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Morton, thank you. Trustee Linton for discussion.
Sorry, we've moved super quickly. I'm not sure of the count from the last vote. So if, I don't know, Councillor Carter, if you have that information in terms of the numbers, because there was a vote online and I wasn't sure if Trustee Edwards voted for or against the motion. So, Edwards, sorry, if Trustee Edwards voted for or against the motion, so.
Well, I think the chair called the result of the motion, and we've moved on to the next motion. So I'm not sure the point of order is timely, Chair Cunningham.
Huh? But I did, but she did.
Jillian, can you confirm the count, or should we redo that vote?
No, I think a point of order on a vote count should be made before you move on to the next item. Chair Cunningham, you as the chair count the votes. It wasn't a recorded vote. You made the count. You made the call. If there's a point of order to be made, it should really be made before you move on to the next item, which I think you've already done. So in my recommendation, Chair Cunningham, the point of order is not timely.
Okay, then we're going to go back to voting on the motion that Trustee Thatcher put forward, and we had a seconder from Trustee Morton. Would anyone like to discuss the motion which is written in your agenda packet?
Thank you, Chair. As I articulated earlier, I think it's good that we are moving towards removing redundancy from our policy, and it is only a two-sentence policy, which I believe is adequately contained within our other policies, our human rights policies.
Thank you, Student Trustee Cameron. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Superintendent Mundy, did you have something you wanted to clarify? Thank you.
Thank you. And we wanted to add that through the work with the audit, so we had an audit from the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility, and one of the things they shared was what they were looking for in compliance was that we housed all of the information into one document, and the information they were asking us to include was the operational content. Specifically in the sample that they provided us, they do talk about it. They say that the words here is the law is flexible, so you can develop your accessibility policies in a way that works best for your organization. There is no right or wrong way. This form provides sample information to help you comply with Section 3 of the regulation, which to ensure that we clearly have all of the content outlined, which truly the content that we were asked to provide was operational and maintained within the procedure.
I'm so sorry, there seems to be some chatter here. Could you please repeat that?
Thank you. So what I was sharing that we went through the audit, and part of the conversations from the audit was to ensure that the information was contained in one place in one document, which was clearly about the operational items. So we indicated that within the report where it talks about assistive devices, training, communication, service animals, support persons, all of those pieces, we needed to ensure that were highlighted through the procedure, and they're all very highly operational around how we implement the understanding and implement the requirements of accessibility. The actual language, and they do call it a policy sample, but they say the law is flexible, so you can develop your accessibility policies in a way that works best for your organization. There is no right or wrong way. This form provides sample information to help you comply with Section 3, and that's the piece where the procedure is in compliance with the requirements under the accessibility through the audit, if that helps.
Thank you, Superintendent Mundy. Any further questions, or should we move to a vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion put forward by Trustee Thatcher? All those against? Any abstentions? Motion does not carry. Moving on the agenda, we're going to move to item B, the rescission of the advocacy policy. And I'd like to call on General Counsel Patrick Cotter to speak to the report regarding the proposed rescission of the advocacy policy.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Cunningham. The report can be found at page 20 of your package, and we are recommending the rescission of the policy, which is found at page 22 of the package. The policy is a two-sentence policy, really indicating that the board may support advocacy through the payment of membership fees to appropriate organizations. As noted in the report, the policy was created in 2007, was last updated in 2013, and really OPSPA is the only organization that the board really subscribes to and pays membership fees to. That obviously would continue, and the policy is not required for the OPSPA membership, nor would it be required for any other membership dues the board may choose to fund in the future. So on that basis, as just a matter of cleaning up the number of policies we have at the board and these sort of two-line policies, we're recommending that this one is not necessary and should be rescinded. So subject to any questions you may have, that is our report.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Can we get a mover for that before we move to debate?
You do have a hand up, Chair Cunningham, as well on the virtual attendance.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards, for putting forward that motion. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Thatcher? Okay. Trustee Edwards, do you want to speak to the motion?
Just a comment that although OPSPA as a membership fee is a requirement under because it sits as the part of the school board collective bargaining act that we must pay. We also get the fees under the grants for students' needs, but we also must pay those to get these services. So even though it's a membership, it's kind of a required membership.
Trustee Thatcher?
Thank you. I definitely am in favor of this motion, but I just had a question, just for clarification purposes. It says that this does not preclude the DDSB from supporting advocacy through the payment of membership fees of appropriate organizations. I was just curious as to what might be an example of appropriate organizations?
Through you, Chair Cunningham. Well, I think it would be something similar to an OPSPA organization, perhaps a provincial or national organization of trustees, some sort of conference membership, and that would be something that would be left to the determination of the Board of Trustees in consultation with the director and the treasurer as well around the available finances.
Thank you, Council Calder. Student Trustee Ben Cameron.
The Ontario Student Trustees Association, which we used to pay memberships to, but don't anymore.
Thank you, Student Trustee Cameron. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those against? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Sorry? Apologies. Moving to recommended actions. The next one is the revised public concerns policy and rescission of regulation. And I would like to call on Robert Surjanic to speak to the motion regarding the proposed revisions to the public concerns policy and proposed rescission of the related regulation.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. This report is found on page 23 to 29 of your agenda package, and its purpose is to present amendments to the public concerns policy and to recommend that the public concerns regulation be rescinded in accordance with the board's direction to phase out all regulations. Policy was originally created in 2015 and last reviewed and updated in 2018. Proposed amendments following this recent review include a proposed name change to the public concerns and engagement policy, moving the policy into the AODA compliant template, title changes for staff and others to match current best practices, updates to align the policy with the DDSB's human rights, inclusive design and accommodation procedure, and the student family human rights issue incident complaint resolution procedure, and the addition of relevant provisions taken from the public concerns regulation. This work was done in conjunction with the Associate Director for Equitable Education and the Superintendent of Family and Community Engagement, as both portfolios play an important role in engaging and addressing public concerns that come forward. The current policy and regulation are included as Appendix A of the report. In Appendix B, you'll find the revised draft policy with revisions shown in track changes. And then in Appendix C is the clean version of the proposed revised draft policy. As part of this review process, the public concerns procedure was amended through Administrative Council, and that revised procedure is also included for information for trustees as Appendix D. The procedure includes step-by-step guidance for parents and guardians to assist in the process of resolving concerns. We're happy to answer any questions on this report.
Thank you. Are there any questions before we put the motion on the table? Seeing none, the motion is, it is recommended that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the public concerns policy be amended in accordance with the draft included in the agenda package, and that the public concerns regulation be rescinded, and that the matter proceed to the next meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration. Can I have a mover for this motion? Trustee Morton, can I have a seconder? Trustee Thatcher, do any trustees wish to speak to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, could you please raise your hands? All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item D, the revised consolidated bylaws on the advisory committees. So I would like to call on General Counsel Patrick Cotter to speak to the report regarding proposed revisions to the consolidated bylaws regarding advisory committees.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham, and through you. The report, it can be found starting at page 40 of your agenda package. As trustees are aware, the board's consolidated bylaws are relatively new, and it was in those bylaws that for the first time the Durham District School Board provided for the establishment of non-statutory advisory committees. However, we are recommending that they need a fresh look. As I say, it was the first time we've incorporated that into our bylaws. And having lived with them for a while, we're recommending a more robust structure around advisory committees with increased participation of trustees and staff for increased efficacy and engagement of advisory committees. And we've included the proposed amendments attached as Appendix A to the report. Before getting to that, though, I do want to flag for trustees, starting at page 44, Appendix B, I've included the clean version of Section 4, which deals with all the board's committees. And it's within that section that I've included the track changes just for advisory committees, beginning on page 42. But if you want to see the whole section, it's there starting at page 44. So page 42, section 4.5, it's essentially a complete rewrite of the advisory committee structure. It was very thin, a process before. So we've now included the rewrites there that are on page 42 and 43. I won't go through reading those for trustees. You've all, I'm sure, had an opportunity to read those. So subject to any questions you may have, those are the proposed amendments to the advisory committee structure.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Are there any questions? Trustee Miller?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. On page 43 of Appendix A, at the very top, can I just get a bit more understanding for the chair of an advisory committee shall be a community member selected by the committee? I just wanted to understand a little bit more of the process, if possible.
Sure, and through you, Chair Cunningham. So I guess firstly, the idea is that these are supposed to be community advisory committees. So that way they're not chaired by a trustee. Trustees and staff would be non-voting members of the committee. So there's engagement there, but the idea is that the chair would be elected by the committee. So after the committee is organized and put together, then at their first meeting, the committee itself would elect their chair.
Trustee Thatcher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like a little clarification. I'm on page 47 and section 4.7.9. And it states that once an ad hoc committee satisfied the terms of reference, then it reports to the committee of the whole standing and it's automatically dissolved. Does it not go to board? Does it not then go to board from committee of the whole standing?
Through you, Chair Cunningham. So the sections that I've included in Appendix B, which includes page 47, these are the terms of the existing bylaw, so there are no changes contemplated to that, nor are there any changes contemplated to the ad hoc committee structure. The proposed changes only deal with changes to the advisory committees. Having said that, I'm happy to comment on the question. The bylaws provide that, because I think we had a couple of ad hoc committees in prior terms where they had actually satisfied the terms of reference, but they still notionally existed. This way, once the terms of reference are satisfied, the committee would automatically be dissolved. So there would be no need to report back. But the bylaws do contemplate that for ad hoc committees, they do report. They provide their interim reports, et cetera, to standing committee, not to board. That's what's contemplated in the existing bylaws, and that's not a change that's before the committee tonight.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Trustee Linton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. In previous weeks, we have had conversations about these committees, one of which being conversation about the Anti-Black Racism Committee, which I don't see reflected anywhere here. I may have missed it, but I'm wondering if someone can provide an update or commentary on that.
So under the provisions of the bylaws, the board can strike additional advisory committees. And the board has, pursuant to the powers that are listed here, has struck an additional advisory committee, being the Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. So that is an advisory committee that would fit within the structure of Section 4.5. So I think when we originally drafted the bylaws, we had 2 advisory committees, so we listed them. But I think we want to avoid the practice of amending the bylaw to list or not list committees as we go. The board has that power. The resolution has been passed for the Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. So I think that's an advisory committee that would fit under Section 4.5.
Thank you. Trustee Brown?
Sorry, through you, Chair. No, my question just got answered. Thank you so much.
Any further? Trustee Linton, do you have a supplemental?
Yeah. So maybe walk me through you, Chair. Walk me through the logic of why we wouldn't list it as a committee.
Director?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the reason is that there's a possibility for creating an advisory committee at any time during the mandate of the board. And so if the expectation was that each time an advisory committee is brought forward for establishment by the board, that we have to go back and redo the bylaw to list that new advisory committee, what that does is it slows down the process. So the purpose here is to actually raise up the process of the advisory committee so that whenever an advisory committee has been passed by a motion of the board, it actually is established because the board has established it through a motion. It is documented in the minutes, and what applies here are the rules or the expectations that the Board of Trustees has passed that apply to every advisory committee that is established. So the reason that there is one listed that is a non-statutory advisory committee was that when the bylaws were contemplated a couple of years ago, that was added in as a contemplation, but now the board has moved forward to think about other advisory committees like the Anti-Black Racism, and so including each one that comes up doesn't make sense, but rather applying a set of rules to how it is formed does, and that's why it's contemplated here.
Yeah, and if I could just supplement that a little bit, Chair Cunningham, the threshold is different as well. So the board could create an advisory committee on a majority basis, on an ordinary resolution. Amending the bylaws, as the directors pointed out, is more time consuming, likely, and it also requires a 2/3 majority vote. So it would be much more difficult to establish advisory committees if they were to be incorporated into an amended bylaw. Like the Anti-Black Racism Committee, Advisory Committee, for example, I don't even know what the threshold was on that, but if it was to be incorporated into the bylaw, we would have to have that retabled, and it would have to be an amendment to the bylaw on a 2/3 majority vote.
Thank you. Trustee Linton?
Thank you. That makes sense, but maybe for future reference, if another advisory committee was formed, where could a member of the public find ones that are in existence? Like, where would that live?
Thank you. And through you, Chair Cunningham, I may defer to the director or executive lead Sir Janik on that. I assume there's a place on the website where we have committees listed, but so I would defer.
We have a full listing of committees on the board website, and this would then be added to that as well. It is typically found on the board calendar section.
Can we move to a vote? The motion coming forward is It is recommended that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the consolidated bylaws be amended in accordance with the terms of Appendix A and that the matter proceed to the next meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration. Can I have a mover for this motion? Trustee Thatcher, can I get a seconder? Trustee Morton? Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Any abstentions? I believe that was 2/3. So that motion, that's what we need, right? 2/3? That was 2/3.
The motions at the committee level pass on a majority basis. It's the Board of Trustees that needs to approve it on a 2/3 basis.
Thank you. The motion carries. For moving on to information items, our first one, 1A, is revised consolidated bylaws, agenda planning, and public question period. And I'd like to call on General Counsel Patrick Cotter to speak to the information item regarding agenda planning and the public question period.
Thanks. I'll do this on behalf of Council Cotter. This item is here on the agenda for a couple of reasons. Trustees requested that both agenda planning and public question period be on the agenda for this Governance and Policy Committee meeting. The chair has added those items to this agenda. For the agenda planning section of this report, draft language is proposed in red in your package that aligns with the request to add this item to the agenda. And for the public question period section of this report, the relevant sections of the bylaws are provided for trustees to review. Chair Cunningham, it's in your hands in terms of how you'd like to move forward with these two items. We did combine it in one report just based on the request that came forward, so you may wish to deal with one item and then the other item if you'd like to do it that way for clarity, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Because this is an information item rather than a motion to vote on, I would just open the floor for discussion. Trustee Thatcher? Oops, sorry, that went to Student Trustee Cameron. Oh, no, okay. Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd just like to speak to the addition in red on page 49. With the agenda setting meetings, the director, if necessary, can invite other staff members as required if an item is on the agenda that would require some input from that staff person. Trustees felt that it would be beneficial for trustees to be able to invite chairs of any of the committees if there was an item on the agenda that might require some discussion. So if a financial matter came up, that we could invite the chair of audit to attend for that item, and so on. If there was an item around governance, that we would be able to invite Emma as chair of governance for that particular item. So that's where that came from.
Trustee Thatcher, before I move forward, would you like to put a motion regarding that? You don't need a motion? Okay. Student Trustee Cameron.
Chair, I'm just wondering what the point of this information item is. I'm seeing draft language. I'm not sure who brought this draft language or why it's in front of us. I'm not sure what the information is supposed to do for us if it's not a...
Sure, I'm happy to respond to that. So two trustees, trustees brought forward requests to add these items to the agenda. So that's why you see that on the agenda package, and it's as an information item. So as staff, we prepared a report that aligns with that request to bring these items forward. So right now, it's really in front of trustees for discussion. Trustee may wish to move a motion on it, may wish to discuss it, and then decide to do something at a future meeting. But this is generally in line with the practice of the committee at this level. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Pat? No, I think that's it.
Thank you. So I will go back to my question if Trustee Thatcher wants to put forward a motion. Trustee Thatcher?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I move that we add the, I don't know how to say this, we make an addition to the policy 5.5.4, the section 5.5.4, which reads, the chair of the board has the discretion to invite chairs of any committees of the board to attend all or part of an agenda planning meeting.
Can I get a seconder for that? Trustee Brown, any discussion? Student Trustee Cameron?
Yeah. We should include when the governance committee suggests that the board should take this up. So I would like to suggest that we add to the end of the motion that the governance committee recommends that the board take it up at its next meeting.
Council Cotter, could you clarify?
No, and normally when staff makes a recommendation, if we include that language in the recommendation, so I think that Student Trustees Cameron's suggestion is a good one. He can't obviously move that amendment, but it's an excellent suggestion, so perhaps somebody would like to move that amendment.
Trustee Brown?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I would move that amendment from Student Trustee Cameron.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Trustee Oldfield? Any discussion regarding the amendment? Trustee Miller?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not opposed or in favor. I just wanted some clarification on the context of the amendment. I think I missed something. I just wanted some clarification.
Council Cotter?
Chair, Student Trustee Cameron, I'm happy to answer or jump in if you wish. Under the board's consolidated bylaws, the committee has the discretion to recommend that it be considered at the next meeting of the Board of Trustees. If without that recommendation, it would only come to the board as a notice of motion and would have to be deferred till the next month for the board to actually vote on it. So including the language at the end has sort of become common practice for us on, let's say, non-controversial items, which I think this would fit within that category.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The amendment carries. Any further discussion on the original motion with the amendment included? Trustee Edwards?
Just a question on how this particular work, because there are times that things go to the agenda meeting where it's from an individual trustee and it might not fall under governance, it might not fall, so are we going to then invite those people to clarify? Because my understanding is that when something goes to the agenda planning, it should have some rationale behind it. As far as that's concerned. So, you know, I just wonder for those trustees that are going to put in an agenda planning meeting, an item on there, and will they be able to speak on their item?
Trustee Thatcher, would you like to speak to that? Yeah, unfortunately, because of technology, we're having a very hard time hearing Trustee Edwards. Oh, okay.
I can speak to that, Chair Cunningham. When trustees bring forward items as proposals to go on the agenda. There's different ways to do it. So for Governance and Policy Committee, for example, that would typically go towards the chair and the vice chair of the committee, who would then consider that. Typically, as staff co-leads for that committee, Council Cotter and we engage regularly with the chair and vice chair and provide feedback and advice around that. When it goes to the Board of Trustees, for example, through the informal process, first of going through the Agenda Planning Committee, the same thing takes place, where there is a discussion, and then ultimately the chair makes a decision whether or not to put it on, and as stipulated in the bylaws, there's other processes to do that. I think the ones in front of us here were definitely fit within the mandate of the Governance and Policy Committee. If something came forward that didn't, I mean, ultimately it is up to the chair's discretion, but there is a conversation that does take place, absolutely.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Oh, Trustee Edwards.
Sorry, another question. What happens if there's 2 items or 3 items? Then we're running into a problem where we could have a possibility of a quorum at an agenda planning meeting, which is not valid. So I'm just a little concerned about that as well.
Sorry, Trustee Edwards, I didn't understand. I wasn't able to fully hear the question. I remember hearing something about quorum in there.
I did hear that. So, Trustee Edwards, I'm just going to say what I think I heard, because we are having a hard time hearing you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But what I believe Trustee Edwards was saying is that if there are several items on the agenda that the chair would like to invite the heads of governance committee to, what happens if that leads to the agenda planning committee having the quorum required for a board meeting? Trustee Edwards, do I have that correctly?
That's correct.
So through you, Chair Cunningham, I think I can take a stab at that. I understand. I think the question is, if a whole bunch of chairs get invited to the agenda planning session and maybe don't show up, and there may not be quorum. The agenda planning is...
That's incorrect, Councilor Cotter.
I'm trying to restate it. Not sure what the question is.
Sorry, the question is, what if there's enough people at the agenda planning committee that would count as quorum for a board meeting?
I don't see the I don't think that's relevant. It's an agenda planning session between the director and the chair, and under our bylaws, that process has been democratized to include other individuals in discussing items to be placed on the agenda. I think the number of trustees present is whether it's quorum or not, I don't think it's relevant. I understand the concern that obviously it's not a board meeting, it's not a public meeting, and therefore the agenda planning session cannot materially advance the interests of the board. And we are, of course, careful to do that during agenda planning sessions, to talk about process really only, and where the matter belongs and what the debate might involve, but not to advocate for the item such that it could be construed as a meeting of the board. And I think the mischief is there, Trustee Edwards, regardless of the number of trustees. If there's 2 trustees there and they're debating an item in a manner that would be appropriate discussion at a board meeting, then that's a problem. And that's a problem whether there's 2, 3, 4, or 5 there, I think.
Thank you. Trustee Oldfield?
Yeah, in addition to what Council Cotter is saying, my understanding of the concept is that at an agenda-setting meeting, if there were a number of different topics where there might be a number of different chairs, that they wouldn't all be there for the whole meeting, that they are coming at a particular time on that agenda for that particular issue. So they would be there for that portion of the agenda setting meeting, and then they would leave. And then there would be a time for the next issue, and that chair would show up to have while we were having the conversations around that particular issue. So there would be, I could be wrong, but I don't see an ability for there to be quorum, because that would be the manner in which we would be holding those meetings.
Yeah, through you, Chair Cunningham. I think I get the point of quorum, meaning it may militate in favor of a finding that it was actually a board meeting, but as I say, I think the number of trustees present is irrelevant to that. If there is debate, even amongst two trustees, that appears to be debate that should be occurring, then I think that's still a problem. This is, of course, not a committee meeting. It's an agenda planning session, so there is no count of quorum there. There's no need to maintain quorum. If there's only one trustee present during the meeting, it can obviously proceed. I don't know if that was part of the question or not. I'm doing my best to navigate it because quite frankly, I'm not seeing the relevance of the quorum question. I think it's one factor that could go in favor of it constituting a meeting of the board, but it would only be one factor.
Thank you. Vice Chairperson Miller?
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding, we have an established schedule for our agenda setting, and just wondering if there would be any issues in terms of turns taken or involvement in the participation of the agenda setting. For example, if you have you were called in, requested by the chair, and you are also participating in a previous session. I'm just wondering if that is a factor that might come up for consideration.
Through you, Chair Cunningham. I mean, I think, are you talking about the fact that you would then be participating in more meetings than other trustees? I think that is a risk. But I think it's contemplated you would be attending not on a rotational basis, but as a chair of a committee and for that purpose.
Trustee Brown?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think, I know we seem to be going round and round in circles here, but I just want some clarification on agenda setting meeting. It does not require quorum, is that correct? Because I see agenda setting as a meeting, but not a meeting of the board. Correct.
Through you, Chair Cunningham. So we were very careful when we drafted these bylaws not to structure the agenda setting as a committee. It's not a committee of the board, and it's not a committee meeting. Under the Education Act, the setting of draft agendas for board meetings is expressly granted to the Director of Education and the Chair of the Board. They have a statutory obligation to set the agenda. What our bylaws do is open the process up so that other trustees can participate, and so there's greater input, so that it's not an unknown factor. Some boards trustees show up and they get their agenda package 4 days before, and that's it. They don't have input into it. They don't know what's coming. So it was a way to try to tell trustees and have greater democracy around that process and input from other trustees. So this is the way that this board is facilitating the chair and the director meeting their statutory obligation to set draft board agendas. They're doing it through this process where there's these meetings that occur monthly or bi-monthly now that include additional trustees.
Trustee Brown, you have a supplemental?
Sorry, through you, Chair, I wanted to call the question. I think this is just going round now. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. All those in favor of the motion, including the amendment put forward by Student Trustee Cameron? All those opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I would like to move forward to information item B, the policy review process and plan, and I'd like to call on Executive Lead Robert Sujanik for the policy review process and plan report. Oh, sorry, Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you. Sorry, there is a second part to this. Was a concern brought forward by one of the trustees in particular, and then others had comments around it as well. And it basically refers to, on page 50, H, where individual trustees are not permitted to respond to questions. The suggestion is that individual trustees could ask for a question for clarification purposes. So that was, we said we would bring that forward to trustees for some discussion.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Do you have a motion to put forward surrounding that?
I move that individual trustees may respond to questions at board meetings for the purposes of clarification.
Can I get a seconder for that? Trustee Linton, opening for discussion. You know, do either people who've done that motion want to speak to it? Okay, Student Trustee Cameron. No. Can you move one mic over?
Yeah.
Because they won't hear you online.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that we would need a motion to actually amend the bylaw and or suggest to direct staff to suggest an amendment to the bylaw that would allow us to do that, to answer question period, or ask for clarification during question period.
Director?
Chair, I'm looking for a clarification because that's two different things. One is answering questions and two is seeking clarification. While it is that individual trustees seeking clarification to questions makes some sense, there is a personal risk for trustees to answer questions that come forward at question period, given that there hasn't been an opportunity necessarily for trustees to receive the information that would allow a precise answer to be given. So that's the, there's a risk there, and so it's just a clarification of, you know, is it an ask? Or is it a presentation of an answer? And that's a distinction that's important.
Trustee Thatcher?
I think Council Cotter has a way. I do want to make an amendment to the motion, if I may do that, but I think Council Cotter probably would like to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Thatcher, and through you, Chair Cunningham. So, you know, we were told that these sections were going to be considered. I didn't know that this was going to be before the committee, and like it seems like a small amendment, but I would urge the committee to exercise caution, and I think my suggestion would be you get a report on this that would comment on the structure for question period and the process for question period, and we would potentially look at the recent judicial review coming out of the Waterloo Region District School Board. This is not a benign issue. This is going to be an issue, I think, going forward for boards. Public's looking for more engagement, and I know that this board is interested in public engagement, but how that is facilitated and what role the board plays in that and the levels of question period, I think this is an issue we spent a lot of time on when we amended the bylaws last time. We went through these sections. We spent about 2 hours, I think, on this particular section. And this amendment, as I say, I don't think it's benign. I think it's a pretty significant amendment. If we have trustees engaging with questioners, I'm not saying it's the board's decision, and that may be the board's decision, but I don't think you have all the information, nor do you have a recommendation from us on what language might be appropriate and you know, sort of the risk benefit around that. So my suggestion is to take a little bit of time and let us put together a report on that would give you the full picture of what this might involve and maybe some suggested language for you to consider.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Trustee Oldfield?
I move that we request staff to provide a report and recommended language around including, or language on, of course now I'm drawing a blank, clarification, being able to request clarification from presenters and people here presenting questions.
Point of clarification, can we put a motion on the table while one is already on the table, since this is not an amendment?
Well, I think it would be open. It would be open to the committee. I mean, there's a few different ways to do it. I don't know what sort of the feel of the committee is, but I get in the sense that there's not a strong opposition. It's not like the issue's being killed. It's just some time. So you could do it a couple of ways, Chair Cunningham. Maybe call the vote on the motion that's before you to make the amendment. And if that's defeated, then you could ask for the staff report.
I think we're going to do that. I think we're going to vote on the original motion, and then after that, Trustee Oldfield would have the opportunity to bring forward the new motion. So can I get a show of hands on, oh, okay, Trustee Cameron, Student Trustee Cameron?
Thank you. Just going off of what we learned with Lori Luckenuk last night, 2 nights ago, I think that motion's actually out of order. It doesn't actually propose something that the board can do. It was just that we can do that. So I don't actually see myself as actually having a motion on the table right now.
Through you, Chair Cunningham, I'm not sure I'm getting Student Trustee Cameron's point. The original motion is to change the language, recommend amended language to subsection H, which this committee can do, and it would go then to board as a recommendation.
Thank you. Trustee Morton?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm just looking at G. Questions to individual trustees or staff will not be addressed at public question period. I think we need to really be careful to protect that. So in the wording, whether it's the use of the word clarification or answering questions, we need to be cognizant of G. That's very important.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call the question on the original motion put forward by...
We have 2 options, to vote, okay.
Could you put the motion up on the screen, please?
The motion was to add that language to H.
Can we put the language up on the screen? Thank you. The motion is on the screen. Can I get a show of hands for people who would like to vote in favor of this motion? Against? Abstain? Thank you. The motion is defeated. Trustee Oldfield, did you want to bring your motion back forward?
Thanks, Chair. I move that staff bring forward a report and recommended language on the issue of being able to request clarification of speakers and presenters at board meeting.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Trustee Morton? Any discussion? Trustee Brown?
Oh, thank you, and through you, Chair. Maybe it's too quick for another amendment, but I feel that your motion is good, but I feel that the section should be included in your motion as on screen, like 5.13.16. Because is that what we're asking? I'm asking for clarification. Is that what we're asking around that bylaw? A report?
I can just speak from staff perspective here. I mean, I think the motion is clear enough in terms of the section of the bylaws that we're referring to. So I'm not sure that is necessary. I think we understand, I think, what the intent with that motion there is, and then we would be able to bring forward a report to this committee. Should that motion pass, that is.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item C, board motions on November 15th, 2022 to November 6th, 2022.
Chair Cunningham, you have item B still, policy review process and plan.
Apologies, thank you. Moving forward to item B, the policy review process and plan. So I would like to call on Executive Lead Robert Surjanek for the policy review process and plan report.
Thank you, through you, Chair Cunningham. The policy review process and plan report is found at pages 51 to 57 of your agenda package, and it outlines the process through which policies and procedures are reviewed and developed in accordance with our internal guidelines for the development of policy and procedure, which we've helpfully included as Appendix A. The guidelines include a couple things: a flow chart to visually represent the ongoing review cycle process, an outline of the roles and responsibilities of staff in the Governance and Policy Committee, and clear definitions of policy, procedure, protocol, and guidelines to assist with an understanding of the appropriate application of each. The guidelines also provide a checklist for staff to consider when reviewing policies and procedures, as each review process will look different, and there are important considerations that must occur before policies are brought forward to the Governance and Policy Committee or procedures to the Administrative Council, which is the staff body that approves updates to procedures. The DDSB right now has 94 policies currently in place, 143 operational procedures, and 48 regulations. Included as part of your package as Appendix B is a policy review schedule for the period of January to June 2024 that we're using as staff to guide our work associated with the development and recommendations to the chair of Governance and Policy Committee meeting agendas. This schedule is in draft form, might be subject to change. Sometimes things do end up happening. They can come forward sooner sometimes. Sometimes it does take a little bit longer depending on what's going on based on other priorities, but it does form the basis for the staff review and work of those items. We wanted to put something in front of trustees just to show the upcoming work that we're doing and coming ahead that then the committee would be able to consider and review. And finally, we thought it'd be helpful as Appendix C in the report to provide a listing of all of the policies that have not been reviewed, that have not went to the board in at least 5 years, and all regulations that currently remain in place. The list has been shared with members of the senior team and the relevant policy holders with an eye to prioritize the review of these in order to get back to a more manageable schedule that did go off track during COVID and before many of our time here at the board. And this is also really in line with the board's motion in the past to phase out all regulations which really don't fit within the board's governance, school board's governance policy framework. And our aim right now, pending on schedules, pending on actions of the board, is to ideally have that work completed in phasing out all regulations by the end of 2025. There are still 43 regulations on the book, maybe one less now, should the board eliminate that at an upcoming meeting. Happy to take any questions about any portions of the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, moving on to item C, board motions from November 15, 2022 to November 6, 2023. And I'd like to again call on Executive Lead Robert Surjanic for the board motions report.
Thank you, Chair Cunningham. In this report's found on pages 72 to 88 of your agenda packages. It provides trustees with information on motions that we're calling of a material nature that were approved by the board at public session board meetings since the beginning of this term of the Board of Trustees, starting November 15th, 2022 through to November 6th of 2023. What we mean by material nature is it's not the motion to approve the minutes, but actions really that the board has taken around the table. Otherwise, that list becomes a lot longer and it's just a little bit more difficult to read and go through. Going forward, we're planning on presenting this information annually to the committee with subsequent reports covering the period of the preceding year between each organizational board meeting, just to give the board a snapshot of the different motions that were passed in the preceding year of the board. That summary of motions is included as Appendix A, includes the subject matter title of each motion, the exact language that was adopted by the board, and then as well, we provided some status information related to the implementation or actions taken following the adoption of that motion. Some of them are pretty straightforward. For example, writing a letter to the minister on a certain topic. You'll note there that item, those items are completed, for example. So that's what that section is. We're happy to take any questions about this report if you have any.
Does any trustees have any questions? Seeing none, thank you. And that moves us to the end of the agenda. Can I have a mover to adjourn this meeting? Trustee Miller, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and this concludes our meeting.